I'm the Director of Student Services for Secondary. And we've got a team here then. Yes, all right. We have Laura Hermine, who's the Director of Student Services for Elementary. Officer Blair, I apologize. I didn't get you in here when I had created this. I should have penciled you in real quickly. We have Officer Blair, who serves as quote, a district school resource officer. He's accessible to all of our schools that may not have one, and also helps with sometimes the broader district concerns we have. Julie, I should have just let you guys introduce yourselves. Julie, you want to run? No? Me?
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Julie Scotty. I'm the parent, look through the parent's eyes. I've been on this since 2009, 2010.
Sergeant? Sergeant Bill Wilson?
Sergeant Bill Wilson. I work as the supervisor for the SROs in Paradise Valley School District. I've worked here for about 14 years.
Okay. So we were asked to present, and so a broad overview of today's agenda. Essentially, I thought with the hour we have, I'd like to present to you first kind of a broad overview, give you some education, some context, some understanding. You're going to get acronymed to death. There's just, a lot of things we use, but I'm going to try to explain to you, really starting from that 30,000-foot level, and then kind of go down a little more specific into some of the protocols and some of the safety things we put in place. So if you'll bear with me for the next 15, 20 minutes, so there's kind of a lot of, sit and get, and let me deliver some of that to you, but it might, again, build some foundational education, so to speak. And then Sergeant Wilson and Officer Blair will present some information regarding our school resource officers, how we utilize them. We're going to show you, talk about the training we did last year with all of our schools with active shooter training, and show the video to you that we have used with that training so you get a taste of what our staff members are seeing. And then I'm going to have a seat, and we'll open this up to a question and answer for the panel. Does that sound good? Is that what we wanted? I just want to make sure. Okay. I'm sure that by the end of the meeting, if we didn't hit something, you'll let us know, and I'm happy to respond back to you via email or take a phone call or whatever you might have. Okay, I'm going to try my best to try to make this sensible and all that, but here are some of the acronyms we're going to start with. We have CERT, School Emergency Response Teams. Every single site has a team that is identified. It would consist of principal, other administrator, custodial staff, SRO if there's there, a nurse, kind of the people that would be familiar with the school, knowledgeable of the school, and they serve as what is called our School Emergency Response Team. I'll speak to this a little bit more, but they're trained in what is called the Incident Command System. That's a FEMA protocol in terms of designating the leadership within that committee. One of their main responsibilities is to produce what is called the CERT, the School Emergency Response Plan. It's a large document that is updated annually, but provides various protocols, annexes, what to do in event of certain emergencies, and what have you. Very helpful document. And then that's done at the district level. So we have a district emergency response team. Julia alluded to that. She's been on that for several years and has served wonderfully as a community member and parent on that committee. That's a large committee. It consists of various departments across the district, facilities, technology, marketing and communications, student services. We have parent representation, community representation, principals from all levels, and teachers from all levels. It's a large group of about 30 people. We meet quarterly or as needed, and they are the go-to when we have changes of protocol, updates that we're considering. Let's run it through DIRT. Let's bounce it through them. We've got all the wisest people from across the district in terms of safety that can talk about those things. As a part of DIRT, once a year also, we do a tabletop exercise. A drill is created that we sit and we go through and mock how we would respond in terms of a certain event. So we do a lot of training in there within the DIRT committee. And with that, DIRT's responsibility, what it is to produce the DIRT, the district emergency response plan. So you got certs, SERPs, DERPs, DERTs. I'm telling you, yeah, you know, it's a lot. It's confusing. So I'll try to simplify that. Oh no, we're not advancing? I guess I gotta get a little closer. Okay. So some of the safety protocols and resources we have, again, when we talk about your school emergency response plan and school emergency response team, they are trained in what is called the incident command system. That's a FEMA designation in terms of training. It's mandatory that all members on that at least complete what's called ICS 100, which is a basic understanding of the protocols that are in place. Things such as when an event happens, who is designated as the incident commander, who is designated in terms of communication. It's all very orderly, but you could go to any school district, any public operation, any government entity, and if you talked to them about their emergency response plan, it would all be in the language of incident command. So we have a common language, it's a common understanding. One of the school's charges is to annually update their SERP. So in fact, schools just completed that this past week. We have those, there's updates. I review those, I go out to the schools and meet, talk with them, not so much from an accountability measure, but I like to spot check, look at what they have done with that. Is there any concerns they've seen in the last year that maybe we need to be brought to our attention, or that I need to take to DIRT, or kind of a larger discussion? The schools, at a minimum, their CERT teams should meet quarterly. And in fact, I generate a template agenda for 2 of those meetings, that things you do not want to miss. This needs to be discussed with your team. And then twice a year, I provide them a tabletop exercise. So they will be completing one for the second quarter. I'm going to get that out to them in the week to come. And it's an opportunity for that team to do a tabletop. What would we do if this happened? And so they work through that. They do that second and fourth quarter of every year. They have to complete 2 of those. Also then, as a part of any incident we have, a part of our process is we want to learn, we want to kind of progress monitor when we have a lockdown, a shelter in place, some kind of incident like that. And so the sites are required to complete what is called an after action report. What took place? What was the issue? How did we respond? Essentially though, the most important thing, what did we learn to get better? Also at our schools, these are not really a role or a part of the school emergency response plan or team, but what I wanted to point out too is in terms of school safety, we have a protocol that is called threat assessment. I think in my experience now, this is my 3rd year in this role, this has really risen to one of the more common things, I should say common. I think one of the most important protocols we have in place, school threats and managing student threats or threats made by students, is a very serious job, and it entails a lot of work, and that's become one of our, I think at our sites, one of the pieces that we have done some of the most training, better understanding in terms of how do we, when we encounter a threat that's made by a student, try to figure out what took place, what happened. Threat management can get, the most important thing is that we're providing the safety of our staff and students. But it also becomes things that sometimes become unwieldy and can get out of control with our community. The social networking, the next door neighbor apps, the threat that was insignificant after investigating becomes community-wide. This has really taken a lot of work in terms of threat management. So we do have a protocol to assess that student and make sure we're in a good place and manage the threat. Care and concern teams. This is really kind of the softer side of our school safety. In the event that we had trauma or tragedy at one of our schools, death of a teacher, death of a student, suicide, we do have 4 teams that are trained that consist of social workers, psychologists, I need your help, Laura, nurses. I think, is that the 3? Yeah. 7 to 8 team members on those 4 teams. I rotate them. If a principal calls me over the weekend and said, Mitch, we've had a horrible tragedy with an automobile accident, death of a student, we anticipate we might need some help with staff members and students Monday morning, I here's the things you need to be aware of so that when that team reports Monday, we can serve your needs best we can. So, I wanted to provide that to you because it's not, when we talk about school safety, there's a lot of pieces that fall underneath that umbrella. So here's some of the drills that we do. This is the Arizona Department of Education minimum requirements. We must conduct a monthly evacuation or fire drill. Has to be done. A lockdown, 3 during the school year. Now that's been increased. It was 2, it is now 3. One of which should happen during a non-classroom time. So in other words, when we're in class and we're going to rehearse a lockdown, okay, everyone is there. A real test is when it's at the end of lunch, lockdown. Really important drill to do. And so we have to do one of those. And again, for every one of those, the school will complete an after-action report. What did we learn? How did we gain from it? There has to be at least one shelter in place. So a shelter in place is, it's not like an active shooter situation. It's not an emergency lockdown. There is a threat on campus is an emergency lockdown. It is urgent. And this gets a little confusing perhaps, but then we have lockdown. There's something going on in the community. There's been a carjacking. Officer Wilson, or Sergeant Wilson has reported to me that it's on Shea Boulevard and the suspect has fled into the Shadow Mountain community. Okay, lockdown. So what that means is there's some kind of potential external threat, but school's going to go on. We're going to conduct class. We're just going to secure doors and gates in that manner. And then we have what is called shelter in place. Gas truck overturns on the 51 and there's fumes going out. Okay, stay in your rooms. We can't go outside. We need to shelter in place. Does that make sense? Okay, so one of those has to be practiced at least once a year. So as I designated there, and then also that all the CERT members, the school emergency response team members, have to complete the Incident Command System 100 course so that they're versed in that. So those are all ADE requirements. We have to do those at a minimum. And then we do practice, we suggest that the schools do a reunification. That's an optional drill at the district level. We haven't done one of those in probably a year. We had one, we did just last year, we used it as our drill, so to speak, but that's when we have to move a site to some other location, or perhaps we had to keep the kids in a lockdown after, and it's gone to after school, then we have to do a reunification plan with the parents. They have to come in, sign up, and pick up their kids. It's quite an operation, but we rehearse those annually, or we did have a matter last year with we did a shelter in place or lockdown due to a potential shooting situation nearby, and so the kids were locked down to well past the school hour. And then we have to do an orderly way of getting them released to parents. That was a lot right there. Okay, so, all right, since I've already burned up 15 minutes, so why don't we do this? How about a little bit of a check here? Any questions with what I've kind of presented so far? A lot. There's a lot there. Okay, we have a question here.
Yeah, what actually constitutes an emergency? Like the first thing you said was like for emergency drill, emergency. What constitutes an emergency?
Wow, there's a variety of things. I mean, we generally what we get is something from the police that, hey, Mitch, the one we had last year was the police went to serve a warrant in an apartment, and it then became a person who was barricading themselves with a weapon. That's an emergency. It was close. It was
No,
close
I
to a
mean
school.
with the school. I mean, how does that affect the school? Somebody goes to someone's apartment or something. How does that affect school emergency?
Well, so we would in that case go into a lockdown. Let's secure the perimeter. The fear is that if there's some kind of a police situation that they are not sure they completely have control of yet, we don't want someone who could flee that house, run to the nearby school, have access. So that's an emergency. We need to lock it down.
Do you do like shooter drills?
Yep, you're gonna see one, yep, in a bit.
Okay, would that go under evacuation, lockdown, or shelter?
An active shooter, that's as bad as it gets. That is an emergency lockdown, and we're gonna talk about other options besides just locking ourselves down.
Okay.
That's a very fluid conversation right now nationally. How do schools respond? Okay, I maybe should not have opened this up to common questions here, because we do have a panel, so if it's real specific to those things, because I just want to get a check for understanding here. Yes, ma'am?
I'm just wondering why the lockdown drills were increased from 2 to 3 per year.
I think it's just, frankly, not just a state response, but a national response. Why do we fire drill in every month when we haven't had a student injured from a fire in decades? And here we have shootings across our nation, and we're saying, well, you know, do a lockdown. There's no national standard. So the ADE said, look, at a minimum 3. Should be done 3. Yes.
Can I go back real quick to the school emergency response team?
Uh-huh.
Can you just tell me who the general people are at the schools that, I'm assuming it's the principal, the nurse, who else, an SRO if they have one?
Correct.
Who else would be part of that team?
You might have your school psychologist,
Okay.
custodian,
Front office.
front office staff.
Okay.
Depends upon the size of the school. The elementaries are a little smaller in some of the staff they have to support, but they would still have at least about a 6-member team. Your high school is maybe a little larger, might even include the athletic director.
Teachers as well, there's usually 1
Absolutely.
to 2 teachers on each team.
Yes.
My question is regarding the lockdown. There is one that is done during non-classroom time. And you gave the example of possibly around lunchtime. There are many messages that come out that schools are short on staff, such as, a janitor or a yard duty. As a parent, I'm relying that those people, the yard duties and janitors, are trained during these non-classroom times. To get all the children in the cafeteria, you have to cut it in there on time, and you only have maybe 2 staff in there. Do you guys take that into consideration with the training about the lack of staff and just the volume of students during the non-classroom time lockdowns?
We have to. That's why that's an important drill. You know, you have teachers that are lunching, and so we now have to make sure that it's understood. That stops. We need you out there. It's all hands on deck.
Yeah, do they know the plan? It's kind of scary because at an elementary school, you have like 300 kids on the playground and maybe 2 yard duties.
That would be a part of their school emergency response plan. They need to be prepared to respond in that event.
I think the question is though, because the CERT team is only a certain number of people, but everyone would be trained on the protocol.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And can I add to
Okay,
that?
let's do 2 more, and then we need to, yes.
Just a quick follow-up on Lori's. So on DIRT, there are parent representatives. On the site level of the schools, are there parents on there, or is the parent, well, just through the city council on the DIRT? Are there parents on the
No, not at the school level.
If you have an actual lockdown or evacuation, whatever, does that count for your drill, or do you still have to do drills on top of that?
You could count that as a drill. For instance, when we have a detector that goes with the fire alarm, often we can do that, you know. I can tell you as a school principal, when I took advantage of those, because you just lost class time. You know, emergency is always priority, don't get me wrong. But if we had one scheduled and next week, and we just had, because the ceramic kiln set off things, we're gonna count that. If anything, that's a really good exercise. We're gonna talk about notification and staff and all that. Yes?
I just wonder, are the response plans available for the public or parents to see, or are those?
Generally not, because they're protected under what's called critical infrastructure.
Okay.
We don't want the public to know everything
Right.
in the plan. It shows a lot of detailed maps.
And plus, if you weren't privy to all the discussions to get to that plan, it's not gonna make sense anyway if you were to read a sentence.
Right, okay,
Really,
I just
you
wonder.
know.
But I know that I'm on school council, and I go and our assistant principal, not like where everybody goes and all, but like, maybe it is, but there is a whole booklet that is available if you ask to look at, like, kind of what processes are available for the school, correct?
Is it the red book?
Mhm.
Red binder, yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of what are called the annexes,
Right.
what do we do in this event? What do we do in this event? I think we're okay there, but we wouldn't want the entire handbook out because it does show gas lines, gas meters, fire. You know, there's things in there that it's it's a need-to-know basis in terms of that. That information now, in fact, we're updating with the state, help me Jeff, what's that called again?
Yeah,
The,
stellar.
haystack.
Constellation.
Stellar.
So, all of that information from each school has been in the process of being put into a web-based program that is secured and protected, that police and first responders have access to, so that in fact, if they had some kind of matter at a specific school, they can go in there and actually go into Haystack's constellation and bring up that critical infrastructure. Because maybe before they enter a building, they certainly want to know where that gas line is, that gas meter, what have you. So they can look at exits, they can look at, frankly, the building. Really good questions, you guys. All right, so this is a ton. I don't typically put like cut and paste into a slide, but this I think has been one of our pieces in terms of communication. This is something, these bulleted points, I shared with our principals earlier in the year regarding communication, because this has become a little bit of some questions, I think, from our parents and families. There's a balance here. So for instance, if you went down to the second bullet, per the fire marshal, evacuation exercises, fire drills may be announced as a drill for elementary grades or special education classes. He recommends not only announcing the fire drill in advance, but explaining to the kids what's going to happen. But with that, he said, you know, you need to be careful about that. You can't announce every drill in advance because people become complacent and it's no longer a drill. We do not say, hey staff, Wednesday at 10:15 a.m. we're going to do a fire drill and put that out. We just don't. But it would not be out of bounds, particularly in the beginning of the year, to say, hey, tomorrow is a fire drill. These classes, you know, the kindergarten, let's have a conversation. In fact, we should educate the kids. Don't be afraid. It's an alarm, we get it, but we're going to go through this, okay? And this is how it's going to be done. Likewise, we don't want to announce those other drills, the emergency lockdowns and such, in advance. Here's the problem, though, is we have had this. Let's call the emergency lockdown, and we're going to make this a real drill. We're not saying a word. So, emergency lockdown, and the kids hunker down, and what's the first thing they do? They're texting the parents are coming unglued, what's going on, oh my goodness. So, the best practice is this, principal, in the beginning of the year, and repeat this monthly if you have to. Folks, parents, we will be conducting throughout the year 3 emergency lockdowns. We will also be conducting a shelter in place. Be aware that that is going to happen. We also conduct an annual fire drill. At least you've got some knowledge. Number 2, best practice. You call that emergency lockdown, but when it's called, staff and students, this is only a drill. You can do that. You've still got a little bit of element of surprise here. They didn't expect it, so the drill kind of has that assembly, some kind of reality to it. But make sure it's clearly understood. This is only a drill, and then say we are now going into emergency lockdown. You're going to get the same effect. They're going to know what to do. And then, of course, I would suggest maybe you can follow up afterwards then with something out to the community at large. Families, we have conducted an emergency lockdown drill today. It was most successful. We followed the protocols, you know, things of that nature, so that you feel better, you understand, and the text messaging has not started. Okay, so that's where we generally go with the communication. I don't think I missed anything in there. They should be letting my office know, or Laura, student services, hey, we're conducting a drill today. Thank you, that helps, because sometimes we get the calls. Wait, what? Pinnacle High is in emergency lockdown? Oh, it's only a drill. We're good. We're good. Oh, I think I gotta get. Sergeant, Officer Blair, are you ready to talk a little bit about school resource officers in the grant?
Sure. So, again, I'm the SRO coordinator for our school district. I've been doing it for quite a while. Our SRO program is a grant program from the state, so every 3 years, up until this year, we'll change, I'll explain that a little bit, but up until every 3 years, we had a competitive grant process for all schools who wanted to put in for an SRO. You could apply to the competitive bid and you were awarded a grant for 3 years. Currently, right now, we're looking at, we have 19 schools, I believe we may have a little bit more than 14 total SROs. Currently, the district is split between 2 precincts. So sometimes I cover the 1 precinct and another precinct that has a couple of schools in it too. So each SRO is then grant specific to a school and it responds to that school, reports to that school each day, works at that school. There's 3 requirements basically for an SRO while they're on campus. First and foremost, provide a safe campus that's conducive to both teaching and learning. Secondly, we teach law-related education, which is 180 hours of law-related education that the officers get into the classroom and they co-teach with teachers on law-related topics to educate the students. And then our third one, probably most important, is probably being a role model and a mentor to students on campus. Let's see what we got.
The SSPT.
We talked about the SSAT, the School Safety Prevention Team. So all of our SROs will be part of that team. Part of the grant that is specific as to the membership, that you have to be on the team, you have to have a mental health expert, you have to have administrators, teachers, and the SRO. They have to meet quarterly and they have to discuss both school safety options, things that are going on campus.
So just a little clarification, because now I've already talked about this CERT team, right, that meets quarterly, and now you have this other team. Some schools choose to have that same group serve to meet the requirements of the grant for that particular team. This goes a little step further. CERT would address real specific emergency response situations, where this team might identify a concern that they want to address on campus: bullying, vaping, things of that nature. In fact, the grant, by the grant, they have to identify specific areas or challenges that the school is facing that they want to address. Okay, so they can work in tandem or be the same group, but do have 2 different charges.
And going along with that, so that's part of our LRE, law-related education. So each campus has to identify issues or concerns that are going on campus through student reports, through activities that they're experiencing on that. Then they'll get together as a team and they'll identify, okay, is there a vaping problem? Is there a bullying problem? And once we identify a problem on that, then the officers will work with the teachers and come up with a lesson plan. And we may say, okay, the 7th grade at XYZ campus is involved in a lot of bullying. So we may do what's called a cohort and go in and we may address all the 7th grade students in the school and do a lesson plan on bullying and what are the ramifications of bullying. We can do that with drug education, bullying education, civics, being good citizenship. We like a few of the other topics we would talk about is alcohol. Every time in high schools, we do high schools when it comes to prom, when it comes to homecoming and everything. We like to get out in the teens and everything, talk to them about drinking and driving programs, consequences and realities of them, prevent anything from happening. So that's probably three of our biggest topics that we're doing on a regular basis. Currently, with the way Paradise Valley is set up and everything, Jeff is our district funded officer. So when we get a grant, that officer is school specific. So someone will say, well, how come Shadow Mountain can't go over to Shea and help them today because their SRO is off? The grant is specific to the school. The officer has to stay on the school campus for 80% of his time, which allows them for training and transportation. Otherwise, he's school specific. Paradise Valley has gone one step further and has contracted with what we call a district funded officer. The Paradise Valley is funding the officer. He's stationed out of our school that we have identified, but he is free to go to all the other schools in the district for any problems that they may be experiencing at that time. So if you have a school that doesn't have an SRO, but they have a situation on campus going on, we'll send Jeff, Officer Blair, over to that campus to address any situation on that campus. That's another added bonus that we have here on Paradise Valley.
So regarding the grant, that is ADE funded, Department of Education. I'm sure you've heard quite a bit of news about a new grant cycle. So we are currently in the 3rd year of the previous grant cycle. Typically, that would, in the spring, we would have been preparing for the next grant cycle. There were some changes with the legislation this year. Governor Ducey and the legislature put more money into that. They wanted to speed that process up, so they actually started the process this last fall. All the applications, this fall, all the applications now are in, and then they expanded it. You probably have read, to beyond just requesting an SRO, schools would have the option of looking at other resources such as a guidance counselor or social worker. There was huge demand with this next grant cycle. But we did get our applications in, and we made all of our requests, so let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, that process, we should hear something hopefully by December, but I won't guarantee it because they were hoping to fund everyone's first request, but as Mitch said, news has reported approximately 900 applications went in for requests from everything from police officers, JDOs, counselors, and social workers, which is huge because the last grant cycle funded about 120 officers, and that was at 12 million. He increased it by 20 million, so it went up to 32 million for the grant, but the actual numbers that applied will far surpass that amount of money, so we're just going to hope for the best, and we need the board grants to come out with how they rank them.
Sarge, here's the other slide. I think you already spoke to some of this. So again, I'll let you speak.
Well, and, okay, so, moving forward to there's 3 schools here that the Pilot Park School District identified as needing to have an officer on campus. So what we've done is we provided what's called the SSO program. That's kind of a combination of the district and the police department working together. To be honest with you, we don't have enough officers in the city of Phoenix to provide officers at every school while on duty. There's too many schools in Phoenix and everywhere. So what we've done is kind of partnered. We did some specialized training to our officers who want to work off duty out of school. So our school can contract with an officer, and they have an officer work off duty on their campus as a full police officer. They're being uniform and everything. They have everything, they have the vehicle, they have everything out there. They're not grant restricted in that they do not have to teach or anything like that. So they're just on campus for security measures, role models, mentors, and if they feel comfortable, they can get into the classroom and address certain issues or problems like that. So currently we have 3 of them working in the district. School vulnerability assessments. School vulnerability assessments, we call them PVAs, threat vulnerability assessments and everything. They have gone on now for approximately 6, maybe even longer years. We started about 6 years ago. We went through all the district sites. We actually walked every campus, every district site, building, everything. We identified any kind of possible threat, any type of issue or situation that we thought we can improve on. The district, through bonds and through a few other sources of funding, I believe it's not specific on the funding, they were to come up with and address so many of those issues.
Officer Blair conducted the brunt of those with some other SROs. This is sometimes the work the SROs do during the summer is conduct. I think I just put school up, like site or school. They're SBAs.
Yeah.
They walk the campus. They go with the principal, generally some kind of maybe maintenance or custodial staff who's really familiar with some of the inner workings of the building too, and they completely walk it. Feedback that we got with that, we did that every one of our schools through last summer and so summer of 18 going through last fall, a year ago, we wrapped them all up by December. It took that long for 40 sites. Not only is it the schools, but the warehouse, the district office, some of our satellite areas like that. And maybe I'll have in a minute have Jeff identify some of the things you wouldn't think of, like bushes and hedges and things like that. But the one thing, the feedback and what we're hearing about PV, because we've had a really strong history of school safety, is with the community support of the bonds and the things we've done over the last 5 or 6 years in terms of perimeter fencing and single point entry and cameras. We're ahead of a lot of the other districts in terms of that kind of security. And so that was very positive to hear that that's where we're at. Jeff, what were some of the things, it was interesting when he would meet with the principal afterwards and debrief, some of the things that you often saw?
the single point of entry is one of the big ones. Creating a point once school closes that you limit your visitor access to one point, so you control and know who's on campus. Our sites were already on point with that. So we go out and we look at options for considerations, not telling you to fix things, but just requesting. Like, these are some things that we've learned from the federal side, state side, of improvements for a site. Fencing, landscaping is a huge one, so people can see in and watch you as extra security, as well as you can see out and see what's going on beneath your walls. Things like natural surveillance, pulling people outside for a garden project allows you to know what's going on around you, rather than being inside all the time. So those types of measures just help. Lighting is a big one at nighttime for vandalism, for criminal damage, because it's not just about when school's in session, but also what's happening throughout the day. So we would go out and walk every site. It took hours and hours, and then we would put that information into a site program, because it's just a partnership. We love that we can pull up everything about your site for an incident. If there's something like last year, an incident going on with a search warrant, what's going on at the site? What do we need to know about? You know, is everything, can it be locked down? Who's in charge? Who can we contact immediately? It's all right there at our fingertips now. And it's accessible by patrol officers, dispatch, fire. Fire loves the maps. They'll pull it up. Every call they go to regarding a site now, not just schools, they want to know what's there. What are they looking at? What's an entrance, an exit? We now have that capability too. So all the maps were uploaded into every school and every site.
No, that's huge, because years ago we didn't have this. This all came from a partnership with working with the district and federal money to put this program together. So it is a huge thing. They talked about what he's doing. He's very doing what's called CEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. So we're actually looking at the buildings and finding out where, lines of sites and stuff like that. Lines like we talked about, shrubberies and everything, so we can make the school safer, just bring people on without increasing costs and that kind of stuff. So I've worked in the program many years, and Jim Lee many years ago started the program, and it's just continued and everything. And Paradise Valley's always been a leader in school safety and security. So you guys really have an advantage here. And things that have
Like-
gone on in
like-
the past and continue to be updated regularly.
Lettering of buildings is consistent with A, B, C, and D, so we know that A is administration and B is this. And there's patterns to that, as Officer Blair's talked about, the signage within the building. We take it for granted when we're used to our school, but the orienting, consider the person who's never been in that school. I can tell you as principal at Shadow Mountain, sometimes navigating that academic building, oh yeah, it's room 303. Well, goodness, so keep that in mind. When a first responder is there, they need to be able to orient quickly and fast and be able to respond. And so those are the things we look at with the principals too. Is it clearly signed so that people know where to go?
I'd say from this district, everything is very up to date. When I went and walked every site, there were minor considerations on new ideas. Things like a camera surveillance system. You can have it, but it's how you use it also. It's more historical. You can't stare at a camera all day long. So those are high cost issues. Low cost things are the CEPTED, ideas, making sure we can see out and see in and lighting and that sort of stuff. So there's a balance on what we suggest, and it's just a partnership. We didn't make anybody do anything, but this district is definitely in good hands.
Before we jump to the active shooter training that we conducted last year, I'll go down to the bottom one, the Paradise Valley required training. Every one of our staff members on an annual basis is required to complete some online training and updating, and the pieces in there would be including active shooter training, evacuation, lockdown drills, you name it. There's actually quite an extensive suite in terms of the training they must do. Our ESPs also complete that training, and then also on an annual basis, our substitutes complete that training, so they have an understanding of the school safety measures that go into it. And those short videos actually do a really good job of providing that information. And then, of course, we would ask that our principals at site annually, when we have those back-to-school days and there's some of the professional development, to take that opportunity to, again, work with staff about the emergency response and what's in there. That's the time to start sharing the CERT plans. What do we have in there in terms of that?
The training is only online, is that what you're saying? All those active shooter training and all the training?
No,
sites and principals should be leading some of that conversation when they're back to school. Of course, if there's any changes in protocol, but then also what we're gonna demonstrate for you here, what we had done in terms of this kind of trained active shooter.
That's a great question, because leads right into the next segment here, active shooter training. So the district does it, and obviously the police department will do active training, shooting on a yearly basis for the whole department and everything. And SROs will also go through additional active shooter training. And then several years back, we partnered again with the district and everything, and we went out to all the schools, and we did what's called an active shooter training to all the administrators and the teachers. We put on, we had an extensive slide presentation about how we developed the program and everything. Then we went into this video. And then we kind of, after about 2-3 years, we looked at the turnover and everything and said, hey, this is time to go back out and redo it again. So we just finished doing it again for the last year, retraining all the administrators and all the teachers out of school. So myself, Officer Blair, along with the principals at the school, go in and we're going to show you the video. We do a little preamp thing before the video with the teachers and everything, just kind of tell them a little bit of history about it, where we came up with and everything, and then we go ahead and show the video and answer any questions. We're going to skip a lot of the story stuff, just kind of go into the video and kind of let you see what the teachers are seeing, and then they have an opportunity to ask us and talk to us. We answer any questions.
It's about a 6-minute video. It's produced by what's called the Coyote Collaborative, that is a school safety consortium here in the state. They're very active in training. It's I think about a 7-year-old video, maybe not quite that old, but it works.
It's not that old, yeah.
It's relevant. It's very good. DIRT has shared this or seen it and viewed it and worked through it in terms of best practices and how to communicate this at the site.
I was literally on the committee to make this, and I named it ASAP for Active Shooter Action Plan, ASAP. So, I'm very invested in this. For everybody's.
We have copies of. All right.
This video is designed to help you think through some situations to improve your preparedness for an active shooter incident in the first few minutes. Your school may already have policies and procedures for an active shooter incident. This video offers additional information.
Schools are a very safe place. According to a study done by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, homicide is the second leading cause of death among youth aged 5 through 18. But only 1 to 2% of these deaths happen on school grounds or on the way to or from school. Recent events remind us that active shooter incidents can occur anywhere in our community. This includes school settings such as Columbine, Chardon, Virginia Tech, and Sandy Hook. An active shooter incident is when an individual actively engages in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters use firearms, but other weapons may be used to hurt people as well. Generally, there is no pattern or method to the selection of victims. As an educator, it is important to prepare so you can help protect students, staff, and visitors. As a teacher, you should know your environment. How do you know there is an active shooter? You may or may not hear gunfire. You may be told by another staff member or student. You may be notified in accordance with your school's emergency notification plan. You may observe or hear a person with a gun approaching the school or on school grounds. If so, notify 911 and school personnel. Once you become aware, there are 3 basic options. You need to decide to lock down, evacuate, take action. Your school may use terms other than lockdown, but the concept is generally the same. Find a classroom, office, bathroom, or other room. Lock and barricade doors. Get out of the shooter's view. Stay away from or cover windows. Turn off any source of noise, such as televisions, radios, and cellular phones. Hide behind large items or in spaces like closets. Remain quiet. Depending on your student population, This may require you to pre-place quiet time activity supplies. Evacuation is another option during an active shooter incident to create time and distance between yourself and the threat. As a teacher, you should consider the limitations of your classrooms and facilities to determine if your students can safely escape. You should also consider in your decision the capabilities and limitations of your students. Based on this information, you must make the decision that is best for your students. If you choose to evacuate, leave your belongings behind. Help others if possible. When you see law enforcement arriving at the scene, keep your hands visible and instruct others to do the same to show that you are not a threat. Follow all instructions given by law enforcement. To assist law enforcement, briefly state the last known location of the shooter, if known.
Hands up, where's he at? Where's he at? Exit up there. Hurry up.
An active shooter incident is unpredictable and will require you to use common sense in your response. First, believe it is happening. Second, be aware of your changing situation and think on your feet. Here are some questions for you to consider. Can you get out of your classroom if the exits are compromised? How can you defend yourself and others if a shooter gets into your classroom or facility? Are you prepared to use necessary force to stop an attack on you or your students? How do you keep your students quiet? Is your door lockable, and how does it lock? Is it possible to lower your students out of the windows safely? An active shooter incident will be chaotic, devastating, disturbing, and confusing. However, your life and the lives of your students are dependent on reaction. By carefully contemplating and planning your response options ahead of time.
This video was prepared using information from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and input provided by law enforcement, school districts, and others. Coyote Crisis Collaborative would also like to thank the sponsors and planning team for their
Okay, that's frightening stuff, to say the least. I get a little goosebump every time I watch one of those things. But we did a good job last year of getting that through to every one of our staff members to review. And I think the key has been situational awareness. Now, they used, what were the terms? There's three options. One you'll hear is run, fight, hide. You know, or it's conceal, lock down, flee, or fight. I mean, these are your options. And I think more and more what we're seeing nationally is the consideration of flight as being your best option in terms of survival. I think what we see though is we as staff members want an answer, a quick solution. Just tell us to lock down. And that's not the world we live in anymore. You've got to be situationally aware. That was the strong message with law enforcement last year with our staff. When you hear pop, 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 and your classroom is adjacent to an exit from that school, you need to make that call, and that is a tough call. But it might save lives. And so that's difficult for our staff. I hope you can appreciate that, but that's where we're at. If that's not a possibility, it is locked down. You hunker down. And if you have to, you better be prepared to fight. And it's not where you want to go.
Well, let me say one thing. Educators went to school to be an educator. They didn't go to school to be a police officer, right? So it was really, it's been years, and for the administration to get their mind around, oh, this is also part of my teaching career. So what it does, it allows the teacher, whoever students near a teacher, administrator, to allow them to think out of the box and to do what you have to do, because not every scenario is the same. There's no one size fits all. So being from a parent's point of view, I am so thrilled that all the educators in our district know that they can do whatever they have to do to remain safe for themselves and the students. And that's comforting. Can you imagine not having any training whatsoever? What the heck are they gonna do? They're not gonna know what to do if a district has not gone through this training.
Is
So,
that the training though? That's the training that you watch videos? That's the
This-
separate
Well,
training?
no, it's part of
Okay,
a broader, there's a
this is-
conversation with law enforcement present,
See,
absolutely.
But nobody
they don't-
actually does the physical, like, nobody goes and like locks doors and stuff.
No,
We actually have, through the district and through the partnership with the district, we actually have done numerous, scenario type trainings where we have actually done evacuations, where we evacuated kids. We've actually evacuated as a district, we evacuated whole schools, and moved them and ran through drills, where we evacuated schools. We ran through a unification drill, went through
What
lockdown
about
drills.
active shooter drills?
Well, that's all part of the active shooter drill, so we do the initial response to the active shooter drill, and we'll have myself and a couple of other officers on campus, so we'll go into, emergency lockdown and everything, and then we will walk that school, and we will try doors, we will try hands, and we're making sure that teachers are locking doors, we're making sure students are understanding. And every time we do this, we learn something. We learn additional stuff, and we apply that to the next time we do training. So situational awareness is huge. 6, 8 years ago, when we first rolled this out, lockdown was the biggest thing that was focused on lockdown.
Dr. Welch?
Sorry, can I jump in for a second?
Yes,
Sorry,
sir.
my clerk in the back. Yeah, so I guess I just want to be clear on that too. Like, you know, so we prepare our staff and our students for those kind of events, but we don't do those types of trainings where, much like you kind of saw in the video, where you have somebody play acting with a gun running around a campus.
No.
I know there are other places in the country that have gone to that.
Not a good call, we are
Right.
absolutely frightening our
Yeah,
kids with
we're
those
not.
kind of
We're just watching
realistic
the
drills.
videos.
We're
Yeah.
not done any weapons or anything like
Those are
that.
teenagers.
So let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
I mean, look at.
It's very emotional when it's our schools, but in terms of situational awareness, how many of you went out at a restaurant are looking for exits,
Right.
front door, in the movie theater? Because you have a much higher likelihood of being attacked there than our children in the school. I'm not trying to downplay this at all, but that's the world we live in today, and we need to be conscientious of ourselves in all settings anymore. Okay, I guess let's go around the horn once, and then we're gonna wrap up, and we'll take any kind of questions you have as a panel.
I like how you use the term situational awareness. I think that's a good context to sort of put around this whole issue, which is very scary.
Right.
And I don't know if this is a question that would go to my school principal, or if there's a protocol that each school in the district follows. But one thing that I noticed in the video that really caught my attention was, how do you know there's an active shooter on site? Is it announced during an intercom? Do the phones ring in teachers' classroom? Does the front office call? I mean, does that vary from school to school, or is there a one protocol that all the schools follow from elementary through high school? How do you know there's an active shooter on site?
Once that shooter starts and you hear it, there may not be, someone may not get to the phone and put out an active, so a teacher, that's what we're teaching the situation with, a teacher may have to make this call himself. It's gonna go out as a lockdown. You see, teachers see someone approaching school or
And
being
every
shot.
teacher has the capability of
Put
doing
the
an
school on
out call
lockdown.
from their classroom.
Okay.
So if they heard something, they can call. This is an emergency lockdown. The problem is we try to be consistent with that message because, you know, there is a shooter. Boy, you better be sure because you're gonna create absolute hysteria. So we would try to provide information, but I think is what Sergeant Wilson is saying. The time is so fast that if we can just get the call to lock down, that would be priority number one.
So there is a call that goes, like there's
Yeah.
lockdown.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm
If
asking.
someone
Yes,
heard-
thank you.
And
Yes.
any
Someone
teacher,
heard
any
that
teacher on
shooting, there would
campus
be an
can put it
emergency
out
lockdown
wherever
call.
they see, wherever it's happening, they can put the school into emergency lockdown. And that's the empowering of giving, it's the empowerment of giving it to the teachers to be able to do that. You're empowering the teachers and staff to be able to put the school on lockdown. That's a good thing.
Is that automatically go to like police stations, police,
Yeah,
one
they're-
button that,
they're
lockdown,
locked down.
that means, the
At
police
this
are
point
notified.
in time, though, that lockdowns don't go automatically into the police dispatch call service. We would get a call from district office gets notified,
Oh my gosh.
lockdown.
Has to go through channels
There-
before you
no,
get.
no, that school would make it immediate.
I was gonna say, right.
Anyone can call 911, obviously, but the lockdown itself doesn't initiate a call to.
But we are in that process of looking at panic buttons that
Well,
would,
we are, yeah.
would allow that, but I will tell you this.
Yes.
Dispatch with 911 does not respond to panic buttons.
Well, no, I'm just calling it a panic button, so
Exactly.
you know, the school gets to press one button and everybody is notified, so
Yes.
like,
Yes.
okay,
Brand new phone system is doing that.
okay.
I'd just like to add, we keep talking about teachers and administrators. Substitutes
Yeah,
also go
substitutes.
through the same type of training. And they also know what to do, just like the staff and administrators in a situation, whatever the situation may be. Shelter in place, lockdown. This is before school starts, that we have to go through individual, videos and pass a course. Even if we don't pass, we have to be talked to. But we are also prepared as substitutes, just like the teachers and administrators.
And also, you guys, I know being a parent, we wanna know immediately, cause I too wanna know immediately. But we have to remember, it's taking me a while to understand this, we have to remember that we have to let the school do what they need to do. And then we will be informed, but we can't be informed right away, cause they have to do what they have to do at the site. And we will be informed. So, just hang in there, it's not, nobody's trying to slide us or anything, it will get to us eventually, when they can.
Absolutely. Yes, back there?
I'm just curious, are there protocol at a district or a site level for students that are on IEPs that might need additional accommodations? And if not, is there a separate document that parents should have filled out with their school team, or would that be included within the IEP?
Want to speak to that one?
Sure.
Okay.
So in the CERT, the site response plan, there are, for every student that has an IEP or needs additional assistance in any way, there is an individual plan for that student with an adult on that campus assigned to that student.
Perfect, great, thank you.
Okay, let's go here, and then we'll go to the center.
I just wanted to say that my son and I, my middle school son and I, were actually in a robbery at a store with a gun that was present, and he handled it very well. And he talked about afterwards about how he had done stuff at school, but the key thing I took out of that is that we probably need to do a little bit more training on the being calm, the cool, collected, getting through things, because again, he's not exactly the calmest kid in the world, but he stayed calm through that entire incident when there was a gun pointed at a lady to ask her for money at the register. So that's just something that I would like to see more of. The video is great, but the more of the being calm.
Absolutely.
I have two questions. My first question is there a difference in the way that we speak to, let's say, under third grade about what a lockdown is? I was in my daughter or my son's kindergarten lockdown, happened to be there volunteering, and the teacher was incredible. Like, I could cry about it today. Because the kids all said, "It's a fire drill. Why aren't we leaving? Like, there's a fire." They didn't understand the difference. So they were locked in the teacher's room, workroom, because we were in the garden. So it was a very unique scenario. We learned a lot because there wasn't an emergency kit in the teacher workroom, and there were a few different things that we learned. But the teacher used the example of a swarm of bees outside, which I thought was amazing for kindergarten. But I'm just curious, like, it obviously would vary a lot on how you would want to teach that age group about the dangers of what's outside.
I think it is very.
It is very situational. Our teachers are really skilled at how to target it to the age they're teaching. So you're right, in a kindergarten classroom, how they're educated in that looks very different than in a 10th grade. Absolutely.
Yeah. My other question was, do we use any third-party companies as a district that monitor social media? I know there are a lot out there that can monitor for keywords and alert. We don't use any of that.
We've not gone there. We've reviewed that under DIRT and have not chosen this time to utilize any of that.
We, department, under certain situations, can monitor social media, that particular school or sites that come that under certain circumstances, so it's an option that you use when you need to.
Thank you.
Back here.
Just as a parent, what do you recommend us to do when there's a drill in school? Because I've been in drills and I don't know what to do. I want to help, but I don't know what to do. The kids know, the teachers know, and what should we do? Responsibly as a parent volunteer. I know you cannot train all the parents that volunteer, I know that. But what do you recommend us to be, to follow the teacher, to be calm, to, I don't know, you know. Yeah, I get really stressed out.
There's a lot of good information on the Department of Homeland Security website. That was, when we did these in the classroom or the school, a lot of teachers asked that because there's other videos, other training material that you can go out and watch. It's all free. And it talks about restaurants, buildings, doesn't just have to be school related. So I would say do some educating on that, and you can look it up on their website, and they update it regularly, and that's the national standard of what they're teaching to for everybody else. That was the DHS website.
I think when you're on campus, you want to follow the teacher administrative lead while you're on campus as a volunteer and everything. You should have them.
Right. So if you're volunteering in a classroom and you end up going into a lockdown, I would look to the teacher for that lead. Obviously, you're going to assist students to stay calm, collected, all of those kinds of things. But as a volunteer, get with that closest teacher or that closest staff on campus. Just like we have our students, you would just be wrapped into a classroom and take the lead from that teacher or staff.
About SROs and stuff first, they have like extra screening for more being with kids.
So,
Because, kids could be scared of cops.
Oh, yeah. As kind of a abbreviated version, so from my, since I teach it, all officers that test for my squad have to go through a testing process, which is an all board process, which is a panel of myself and two other supervisors, and we will ask them school-related questions and get their responses back, and hopefully select the best candidates that we feel will fit in and work with the administrations in the school. We've been very successful in everything, and by that, most officers you'll find on the police department, the ones I'm putting in for the schools want to work with kids.
I know, that's
We
the
have
problem.
A-type personalities, so a lot of officers don't want to work with kids. So the officers that are putting in for school resource officers do want to work for kids and everything, and we do have a screening process and one board process before we select any officer.
And they participate in ongoing training.
Oh, and every year, we put them, the Department of Ed puts them through a week-long teaching class to teach them, and then every year they have to go through an additional class to learn how to teach. And we always co-teach, we don't teach in any classroom by ourselves, we're a certified teacher, so the officers are co-teaching with that teacher in the classroom.
I have another question about police officers. When you get called for, I don't know, a child that's, I don't know, for whatever reason you get called, what rights does that student have? You get to like frisk them, you get to handcuff them,
They have all the rights that I think what you might get out here is, we are not on campus to enforce school policy. We are not on campus to increase the student-to-prison pipeline. That is not our goal. We're not there to arrest kids. We're not there to enforce school policy, whether it's a dress code policy or anything like that. We are there to provide a safe and atmosphere that's both conducive to teaching and learning, so we are police officers, and we are there to do that. We're also there to teach LRE, teach related education, and be role models and mentors. We, as a department, we want to prevent kids from getting in trouble. So if it can be handled at the school level, we will let anything that can be handled at the school level, at administrative level, be handled at the school level, administrative level. We cannot frisk. We still have the same, they have the rights as any other citizen. We still have to follow probable cause. We can do anything like that. We have thresholds that we have to
There's like kids that are like drinking in the bathroom or vaping or bringing weed to school. Is that something that the school handles, or is it you guys? Who?
We will handle it jointly, but I will tell you that the discipline will take precedence in those type of situations. Now, I'm not gonna tell you that if a kid comes on campus and dealing drugs on campus, that we're not.
It's a criminal matter.
You don't know that. You don't know that. Some kid just tells you, hey, I think this
Okay.
kid's doing drugs. Then does it go to the principal?
Most investigations start in administration and the
Okay.
administrator and school level. And until they become criminals, then we get involved. So if they come across something, vaping right now is considered a tobacco product. Vaping on campus, is vaping, my possession of tobacco product, is that any offense? We are not going to arrest the kid for petty offense. We are gonna let the administration, the school, and the parents
goes first before the.
Until it becomes criminal, we will get involved in everything. And then if we can get involved and back out after we get involved, we will be more than willing to back out and let school and administration.
Scared straight, that works.
Yeah, we want them to handle it.
Okay.
You can see that in our policies, so if you want to know what that process looks like, you go online to our website. It's outlined in our governing board policies how we handle those types of situations.
I have two questions. Do we have security that checks our schools on nights and weekends when nobody's there?
No, the schools are alarmed, so if there was any kind of a breaking and entering or some kind of vandalism that were to do that, that's the extent of it. But no, we don't have a vendor or third-party security that comes in and patrols or looks.
And the other question was, we have 19 schools that have SROs. Like, there were,
There's 19 schools, 14 SROs.
Right, because some of our elementary schools will share an officer.
right, so some of them, but so there's 19 actual schools, so we have over 20 that don't have one.
Correct.
So what is like each school's responsible for trying to obtain an SRO by participating in the grant? Because that seems like a lot of schools that are going without this great service.
And it's like that statewide. I understand you guys, in comparison to all the states, Paradise Valley and Mesa are probably the two districts that have the most SROs. If you look at it district-wide, you guys do an amazing job. The schools themselves, they do apply individually as a school, so each school comes up with its own writing team and writes the application, writes the grant and everything, and applies for it and everything. They have to decide whether they feel, that they want one to apply for one and everything. Paradise Valley has been extremely successful in getting them up until this point, and we hope that that continues. But there's just not enough officers. We have 75 SROs in the city of Phoenix. That's probably one of the largest SRO programs within the state. And we have 75. You know how many schools are in? You can imagine inside 44 in Paradise Valley alone. So there's a lot that don't have them. That's the advantage of having Jeff as a district officer who's able to go out all over, and also having the other schools covered on some of the SSO programs. Have an officer like this.
Sure, here, then we'll go here.
Dr. Van Acton, I have to put Julia Scott in the hot seat. So Julia, you've been on this committee a long time, and you've advocated over the years for some key things. We all remember, we've been around a while, Julia's advocating for the buckets, and I know you really advocated for certain things with the active shooter training. So what's your big thing now? What would you like to see us do next as a district? What do you feel like is the next step for the safety program?
I had no idea she was gonna ask this. Okay, this is, I'm not being fluffy, but we have so much in place that I can't think of one particular thing that we're lacking. I think the next biggest thing is the communication with our new phone system, being able to do the communicating to all the different levels and immediately. I think that'd probably be my main goal, one of our goals that we have. The locks on every classroom door. It used to not every classroom had a lock on the inside. Because I was a sub back in the day, and you'd have to take the key and then go outside and lock. Well, if there's an emergency, how the heck am I gonna go outside and turn around? So one of the things that DIRT did, we accomplished this a few years ago, with every single classroom has the lock on the inside.
But is it a key lock?
Huge. No, you can just lock it.
Okay, good.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. So Stacy, so to answer your question, I really honestly can't think of a hole that we have that we need to fill right now.
So I do it, we've got the bond and the override election coming up this year, and I know that I've heard Laura Felton kind of talk repeatedly about one of the main priorities for when we pass the bond and override, using some of those funds to streamline some of our safety protocols across the district, and that would potentially include like a button, intercommunication button that allows everyone to communicate within the school, and also potentially, depending on what your jurisdiction is, whether you're located in Scottsdale versus Phoenix PD, potentially being able to communicate as well via that button to outside like law enforcement. And so I know that they've made that a top priority. I've heard her talk about it a few times. And so again, just reiterating the importance, I think, of making sure we those crucial funds to streamline this really, because this is something I think we keep talking about as a really important upgrade that we'd like to see across the districts, right? Is being able to communicate in an instant, both internally and externally with law enforcement.
Another thing that we've talked about entered is also video cameras and surveillance cameras on every campus. We have them on all high schools, some of the middle.
No, all high schools.
Just all high schools. So I know that if we were able to secure those funds, that's another thing that Dirk is looking at.
I just wanna give a little shout out because like, I know this system, it works. When my kids, we moved here when my kids were little, our school, we're in one of the schools that's actually in the Scottsdale district. Like, it's the PV school, but it's over in Scottsdale City. And they went on full lockdown. It was a potential kidnapping or something. And as a parent though, I was terrified obviously, because it took like an hour and a half to pick up the kids, because we all had to do a search procedure. But when I picked up my kids knew nothing about what was going on. I mean, they knew that there was a lockdown, but they felt safe. The teachers did a really good job about making sure that they were safe and they weren't overwhelmed, because like my youngest, I think, was in kindergarten. I mean, my middle one was in kindergarten at the time. They weren't terrified. So the training that the teachers go through, it works. And then of course, my older one, when she was in middle school, it not only works on campus, but it works when they're away from campus, the training that the teachers and the staff go through. Because my oldest was on the trip to DC a few years ago when there was a shooting. And like, as a parent, my child being that far away, but the principal, the staff, everybody did an excellent job of, the principal jumped in an Uber and like got right to the side, took care of the kids. It worked, and the kids were obviously traumatized, but they were taken care of. So like, I know it seems like overwhelming with everything that's done, but the teachers are trained to keep the kids safe. And I feel, as a parent, I feel comfortable with my kids at school. And like you said before, I actually feel like they're safer at school than out with me in Walmart sometimes. So.
That's really good.
Yep.
So a lighter question.
Couple more questions.
So a lighter question. So as the district SRO, what does your day look like, or maybe your week look like as just in that role versus an SRO at a school site specific?
I take a lot of calls throughout the day for questions, concerns. Can we run this by you? Here's an issue we have going on. What direction should we take? I work with Mitch a lot. We work together on figuring out a solution. A lot of child abuse calls, things like that, to get reported. I spend a lot of time educating kids. I get brought in to a parent meeting or a sit down about an issue that already happened, and then they get to hear the law side, not a yelling at you, but how to do better, how to answer, how to deal with problems. So a lot of education with that throughout the day and throughout the week. A lot of calls, a lot of criminal complaints. When it comes to drug issues, it's a lot of the education side. I would rather spend half my day to help the kid work through and stop doing that with the help of all the resources the school provides. So that takes up a lot of time, but it's well worth it. So.
Did the teachers that are involved in this, do they get paid extra, because this was really part of their job description? Because this is all extra stuff, I mean, we're putting on our.
It's a part of the job description, providing school safety, it's a part of the job
All
now.
this like other stuff, no?
Certain meetings on those committees.
No, I didn't. Because look, can I say one more thing? The Parkland, remember the Parkland, Florida shooting? We had the fire chief and the chief of police from Parkland come and speak at a consortium that we attended as Dirk. And of course, I took a bazillion pieces of notes, and I came back to Dirk and asked the police officers, because there were so many holes and so many problems that happened in Parkland, so many things that went wrong, that could go wrong, went wrong, And I came back and asked, and it does not happen. They told me, no, we have this in this place. No, we do this for this. No, everything of all my concerns of what would happen if we had a catastrophe, it was put abate. And my point being, I just felt comfortable knowing that the Scottsdale and Phoenix Police and Fire have such a working relationship, and the communication to them to come to our sites, to know where to go, is half the battle, I think. So that was huge. So I want to be sure and share it with you all about that.
Okay, we went long, sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful
Thank you.
questions.